Hello, and welcome to Ad Age's custom webcast sponsored by Mountain. The topic of today's webcast is CTV's next evolution, why 2023 is the biggest year yet for brands. I'm Christopher Hosford with the Ad Age team, and I'll be your moderator today. Now, we have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We'll hear from today's presenter, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. So to participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the text area and then click the send button. You may submit your questions at any time during the webcast, and we'll address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce our presenter for today.
Hello.
Alexa Tierney is Senior Director of Customer Success at Mountain, and in today's webcast, she'll give all of us insider insights for navigating the changing landscape ahead for connected TV. We'll also hear her strategies from Mountain to implement into your next year plans, highlight the potential strengths and pitfalls of the major streaming services' new offerings, and share where targetable and measurable television is heading next year and beyond. So Alexa, welcome. Take it away. It's all yours.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Christopher. And hello, everyone tuning in. Try to keep this as entertaining and on the money for you as possible. I know we're all a little Zoom fatigued, so thank you for tuning in. And we'll go ahead and get started. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, great. Well, to kick things off today, just a note of really the main takeaway, if again you walk away with nothing else, we're in an exciting time in the industry, and this year and into next year, CTV is really facing a pretty big shakeup, possibly the biggest yet, as folks are saying, and a lot of that has to do with the opportunities that are arriving for brands as these different streaming services are embracing more of an ad-supported model or even a combo model. And so going into that, again, we want to help brands really set themselves up for success in this new world, and even just kind of understand a little bit of the lay of the land of what's going on. So for today, and Christopher kind of alluded to this, we'll touch a bit on really what's driving this model and some of the changes that we are seeing. Talk a bit about what connected TV as a space is going to look like, potentially heading into next year in 2023 and beyond, and how to prepare for some of that. I'll touch on a bit of the strengths and even some pitfalls to think about when it comes to streaming more from, again, the lens of an advertiser, of a brand that's looking to get their message out on this platform. And then finally, again, some strategies and considerations to keep in mind when you're evaluating a solution and then really evolving your program in CTV as this rolls out further. So kicking things off, where are we at today? The world is definitely changing, and CTV is having a year of transformation in a lot of ways. So, you're seeing viewership and subscriptions rising. I feel like every year we have these webinars and these conversations, and it just keeps going up, which is great and it's exciting. And I think you're also seeing that with that, more and more brands are getting familiar. Maybe they've been getting their feet wet over the last couple years. Now it's a more robust part of their strategy, or certainly investing more in what connected TV advertising can look like. But in general, the landscape itself is actually changing quite a bit as well, right? So you've got all of these media giants making some pretty big moves. You have the Warner Brothers Discovery acquisition, now also taking control of HBO Max. There are a lot of conversations around really consolidating, I would say. And these big players are starting to look at combining different streaming services. So whether that's Discovery Plus, HBO Max, you'll also hear a bit about some rumors that Disney and is looking to combine Hulu with Disney Plus as early as next year or into the year after that. And really, you see this kind of a race almost for streaming dominance. So you have these big shakeups, a lot of executive leadership changes and restructures being announced. I think, unfortunately, even some news, I think, of layoffs coming up. So the takeaway is there's a lot going on. You have these big media conglomerates that are making these moves, and, streaming content then is really even at its peak, I would say. And the truth is, at the core of this, a lot of it comes down to where are they going to get their revenue from, and how are they going to meet the needs of their shareholders and their stakeholders. And so I think a lot of that then ties into this boom of now ad supported within streaming and OTT. Most of the leading streaming services have either launched or are planning to launch new ad-supported options. So the most notable ones, of course, that most have heard about, Disney Plus, planning that launch for ad-supported, targeting into this year. Netflix was probably the big one, right? Because that was a company and a leader who had really been pretty adamant for years that they wouldn't go the ad-supported route. But again, money talks and shareholders talk. And at the end of the day, they're now in their plans to roll out an ad-supported tier as well. And, timing on that may be a bit TBD, but that's certainly something that is being prioritized heavily. And so these are creating really a big moment, again, of I think, responding to the consumer, because there are a lot of subscriptions out there, and most of us are willing to pay, to stream different content, but we're only willing to pay so much. And that's where having these options of an ad-supported tier make a lot more sense, so that someone can continue to enjoy all of the different content that's being developed across OTT, but do so a bit more affordably, right? And instead of making a decision about having to cut a subscription altogether, I think this opportunity of either a hybrid model or a fully ad-supported model makes a lot of sense for a lot of people out there. And so, again, that's kind of what's leading us to this, let's say, CTV 2.0. It's the revolution's evolution. So you've got all of these different ad-supported offerings that will be planned to be at least sold at a more affordable rate. And so you'll look at, again, all of these different providers really doubling down on their premium content. And there's a lot out there, right? I feel like there's so many great shows and news sources out there, whether that's on Peacock, HBO, Prime, et cetera, right? There's so much out there to see, and subscribers are really looking for ways to get access for less. And so, again, with this in mind, what this really means for brands is there's a huge opportunity here. There has been, but it's just growing every single year. I think we're up to over 70% of the US population that is streaming on OTT. And so it's a huge place to reach users. It's not really something that a brand can afford to sit out on anymore, especially because, there's a lot of benefit compared to a traditional linear buy, where it doesn't have to be this super pricey, complicated thing to test on CTV and to, make tweaks and optimize and improve without some super involved buy. And so again, that really opens up opportunity for brands of all sizes to test into this channel. And so as, again, this gets more popular, that does mean that you've got likely your competitors and certainly a lot of different brands that are out there competing for user attention. And so it's now going to be probably more critical than ever to ensure that your content as a brand, an advertiser, is timely and relevant, because when you're actually a user on CTV, we find that you're much more likely to pay attention to ads that are relevant. That's almost an expectation of a CTV audience now. They know and expect ads to be relevant to them. It's, very akin to how things evolved on social, and there's a certain expectation in this digital space for relevancy. So having a well thought out strategy, not only for targeting, but also creative, is going to be really, really critical as we step into this kind of new era of CTV. The other piece that I think is becoming really clear is that you can't afford to really just advertise on one service or one platform anymore. If you're only buying on Hulu, or you're just negotiating a buy with NBC and you're saying that's my CTV investment for the year, you're barely scratching the surface and likely missing out on relevant potential customers because, as I mentioned earlier on, you have all of these different streaming services and all this different content in these different places. And even looking as a consumer myself, I'm hopping all over when I'm watching CTV on my Apple TV, right? I'm bouncing all over the place. And so you really do need to find a way to reach your audience wherever they're consuming content. And right now, that's a lot of places. And any one household is likely streaming from a variety of different sources and services. So, finding a solution and selecting a solution that offers premium inventory across a higher variety of networks is going to be really valuable to find your audience and ultimately, convert them into customers. And so at the core, I think it's going to be very important from a strategy standpoint to understand across all these different offerings, across these different providers, what is their approach and their tech behind audience targeting? What sort of content are they slating? What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of these different providers? I think in particular, the audience piece is where it gets most interesting on CTV, right? Because across all of these different providers, there's a lot of different native targeting that you can do, but also third-party integrations. And that's really the benefit of digital, right? It gets you that more laser focus. And so having a well thought out strategy for that is going to be really critical. I touched on this a little bit, but I'll note it again. We're seeing across the different OTT providers out there and streaming services out there a huge effort to double down on producing new content. And securing content. And a lot of that is coming from some of these larger big media companies that are able to invest in that, right? And so that's the other thing that's been kind of interesting to see is how content and what is streaming is shifting. I think even to some of the early days of Pluto as an example, right? In the industry, we kind of thought of it as one thing, but over time, that really evolved too, and different, more premium content investment. And that's, only getting stronger across some of these larger networks as well and larger streaming services, right? So they're evolving what you might see on Hulu, what you might see on Prime or Netflix or Peacock, et cetera. And so there's a lot of, I think, not only interest there and viewership there, but also a lot of different user data that again, from a native audience targeting standpoint, advertisers can start taking advantage of. Now, onto some challenges, right? Some potential roadblocks here, because it's important to be mindful of those and plan for it. With this much opportunity, anytime there is that much opportunity to reach some highly engaged users, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. It's kind of like those early days of social media advertising, where you realize all this potential and you realize how focused you can be with your targeting and your messaging. And then you have to take a step back and realize the reality that creative production is not easy. It's difficult to keep up with the expectation of that relevant, timely content. And in particular, we're talking about filming TV commercials, right? So it's a much heavier lift in most cases and can be very expensive depending on the solution you use. It can also be very time consuming. So for a lot of brands, even some of the top advertisers, they know the potential with CTV, but having enough content to really approach their strategy thoughtfully is still a challenge. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things we hear or see from our own advertisers at Mountain is needing that creative support because the production is so expensive and time consuming in a traditional model. So that's a big piece for sure, having relevant content. I think additionally, determining the targeting tactics can be challenging, and even understanding, again, in still a bit of a fragmented space, how you can keep a consistent message and how you can develop a strategy to reach the right types of users for your brand. Again, and then, for some of the other things to keep in mind, anytime there is an industry in flux, that can lead to a lot of change. And so you have to be nimble, right? You have to find ways to, whether it's through partnerships or, a platform that you're using, be able to respond much faster to where the demand is and where the users are. Because, in linear, right, you're kind of set, you're doing it up front and you're stuck. With CTV, the good news is that's not the case. But it is important to then be able to be nimble with that and make quick pivots. So you're talking about, I think it's, what is it called? Fast-vertising, right? Where you have to be able to move nimbly and quickly and be flexible with your strategy. And then finally, the last thing that I think can be a pretty big pitfall is approaching CTV as if it was the same as linear. And some of these streaming services aren't necessarily leading with or even offering measurement and reporting that speaks to the actual performance, right? So it's kind of looking more at traditional TV branding metrics, when in reality, in the digital space, there's much richer data to use. And so that's another key thing. If you're investing already in CTV or you're going to be investing in CTV, to think about how you want to evaluate the success of that campaign and whether the platform or streaming service you're using can really accommodate that. So all things to think about. So recapping, a bit of what's next, and I'll touch on this very briefly, but there are some rumors and things circulating around additional acquisitions, more consolidation across the different platforms, like I touched on earlier. So some of that will remain to be seen how that unfolds, but it's definitely going to be top of mind to keep an eye out for. And then in general, CTV becoming a really key part of most of these brands' digital ad budgets. And in general, about 56% of brands are continue to increase their digital ad spend in the coming year. And CTV is kind of a key complement to that, because again, a lot of the really value add capabilities of digital apply in CTV as well. And so that's again, a big opportunity, but does lead to a need for video production at a much higher scale. So what do you do from here as we enter this brave new world? I would say, objectively, the key is to find a solution that, again, can be nimble, that offers inventory across, a higher number of the different services and apps out there, so that you're not cherry picking, right? You're expanding your reach as much as possible. Looking for solutions that offer up robust and rich targeting opportunities, first-party, third-party data, et cetera. There's so much out there that is available on CTV where you don't have to just rely on very high-level demographic data, you can get a lot more laser focused. Or you can go broad if you want to, right? So aligning with a platform that can help you accomplish whatever strategy you're looking to execute. Now, in general, I am going to be a bit biased because I do love tech. We're in the tech space. So being able to automate and optimize in pretty near real time, I think, is an important piece of the puzzle. That, I think, coupled with human insight, is always going to be an important driver of direct response performance. So that's a key thing to look at and to evaluate out of your partnerships is, are they working hard enough for you to keep up with, the types of performance metrics that you need to hit to justify these budgets. That includes looking at metrics like return on ad spend, CPA, things that TV wasn't necessarily always held to before, but it can be now. So finding a solution that, again, can optimize and measure on that. And then, again, allow you to be flexible and adjust your strategy if needed in close to real time. As you can tell, I tend to nerd out a bit on targeting, audience targeting, because it is so key. It's one of the most impactful benefits of CTV is being able to deliver your story to the user that you want to. And it's not based on a traditional spray and pray method. You can have more of a one-to-one conversation with the customer than you can on traditional television. Because you do have those targeting opportunities. And so one of the things that we certainly always recommend to our customers is think about what, at the core, what is the message you really want to tell and who do you want to tell that to? And that may mean multiple different campaigns with different audience segments, different personas, the ability to test creative and test audiences within those campaigns. That's what's going to allow you to optimize your buy, optimize your strategy, and then ultimately, capture much more attention from your users than if you just create one piece of content and target it to the world at large, right? So I think, again, one of the key things that we recommend is being really thoughtful about the different stories or calls to action you want to tell to different types of users. And, again, approaching CTV similarly to how you might approach some of your other digital channels. How do you look at both upper, mid, and low funnel audiences and test different strategies and messages against those? That's going to be really key. And it can be based on things like interests. It can be based on things like past purchase behavior. I'm always amazed at some of the audiences and the data providers, what they're able to collect out there. And so, do some research and see the types of users that you could really run an effective campaign against so that you're developing loyalty and enforcing some really strong buying habits from these potential customers. And then beyond that, right, once you're executing this type of strategy, I think it's really important to be able to dig deep and see what really works. So as an example, having different audience segment reporting available can be really valuable, so that you can run a campaign and look at the individual audience level to see what their site visit rates look like, their conversion rates, and use that to inform not only your optimization for CTV, but those learnings can apply across a lot of your marketing mix, right? So the nice thing about CTV is you could even use some of those insights to inform what you do in other tactics and other channels. And at the very least, it gives you a good picture of what users are really engaging, what households are engaging with your brand on connected TV. So now comes a little bit of a shameless plug for performance TV. So that's the Mountain platform. And, I'll just note that part of why certainly I'm so passionate about this and why a lot of us on the Mountain side are real zealots about CTV is because, again, we are excited for the opportunity that it presents to customers and to advertisers at large to really maximize this high quality, premium inventory and tell your brand story in such an impactful way. So some of the key things to note about our platform specifically, in case you aren't as familiar, we serve exclusively on living room quality inventory. So we're talking about that big screen in the home. So again, very premium, highly curated list of inventory sources. We track using our cross-device verified visits attribution model. So we're able to actually look at that household level attribution across, the TV to the laptop to the smartphone in your home. And there's some more complexity to that, but I won't bore you with that today. We are also integrated directly with Google Analytics so that you can look at some third-party reporting as well, some validation outside of the platform directly. And we're really passionate about continuing to build out and evolve our tech from an optimization standpoint. Again, a very automated solution so that our customers can just put in their budget and their goal, and our platform is really going to do a lot of the rest. It's optimizing in real time based on all of the different data inputs that we have, and then taking that and really having the proof in the pudding, right? Being able to report on that in real time in a customizable dashboard so that you can view and analyze the data very quickly and make informed decisions from that. So it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, that kind of fast advertising mentality, so that you can use all of the data inputs, learn, test, iterate, and get enhancements in market as soon as possible. And then finally, one of the other things that's been, I would say, a very exciting launch, both personally and for the company as a whole, is we just launched our incrementality reporting solution. So that is, I think, going to be a real value add for our customers, being able to evaluate the lift and the impact that their media is having on their business. So very, very excited about that. And that's actually just launched basically in the last week, early this week. So exciting things ahead from that lens. So as we wrap up here, a couple key takeaways from today, now that you've heard me talk for a bit. The key is that CTV is becoming more and more advertiser friendly, right? It's been an exciting opportunity, but it is even more so now as these streaming services are looking to drive down costs and boost subscriptions and or boost just general viewership, right? And finding solutions that can accommodate that. And as a brand and as an advertiser, the opportunity is huge, right? You can't really afford to miss out on that, because now that it is so much more accessible and there are so many more users engaging with this content, you don't want to miss out while your competitors or other brands are going after the audiences that you're trying to convert for your business. Now, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all strategy, right? It is important to think about how and who you're trying to target. And it's also not a one-size-fits-all budget. Oftentimes we're going to recommend you start a little bit smaller and scale based on results. So thinking about how you want to test into this channel, what sort of content you want to showcase for these target customers, et cetera. And then again, just keeping in mind that not all these solutions from a CTV advertising standpoint are created equal. A lot of pros and cons across all of them, right? And more pop up every day. But I just highly encourage you to research and look for one that allows you to maximize all of the benefits and value adds that come from this digital first, audience first CTV space. And with that sums up the presentation today, and I think we can move into some Q&A.
Great, thanks very much, Alexa. Yeah, indeed, we're ready to open the floor to your questions. Now, as a reminder, to participate in the Q&A portion, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area and then click the Send button. We've already got several great questions that have come in, but we could always use more. So let's get right to it. One of the points that you stressed, Alexa, was that CTV is, in fact, rooted in digital, the same way you might say search and social is. One of our attendees asks, how are brands tracking results? Our attendee, Josh, asks, I see many brands utilizing QR codes, for example, in advertisements. Are QR codes a best practice, or are there other more effective tracking methods to consider? What are your thoughts there?
Great question. Hi, Josh, who asked. Thank you for that question. So, it actually comes up a lot. And I think part of that came from, I think it was a Super Bowl commercial where a QR code was present throughout the duration. It was a super long, ad spot. And granted, that was a little bit different. I'm not going to say rule out QR codes completely, right? I think if they're present long enough in the ad, there's some likelihood that a user might engage. But at the same time, I think, again, from a pitfall standpoint, some folks think that they need a QR code because that's the only way to track. And that is not the case. Again, depending on the platform that you use. But as an example, speaking to Mountain Technology, we're able to track directly based on tracking and conversion pixel that you can implement on your website. So we're able to actually directly attribute a website visit and then ultimately a conversion. There's also opportunities to measure from like a mobile app standpoint, et cetera. So you can measure a lot more one-to-one even without a QR code. Now, some brands do want to test QR codes if you're trying to drive someone somewhere specific, but the reality is it's really also going to depend on how long that's present in the ad. And if you think about it, when I'm sitting and watching a show, if there's a QR code at the very end on that final end card, I'm probably not going to be quick enough on the draw to bring out my smartphone and try to capture that right in that final second, right? So that's probably not a very common user experience. So you're going to be missing out on a lot of the potential engagement and attributable performance of that. Whereas if you're leveraging a solution that allows you to track based on cross-device behavior, you don't need that QR code. And I will say, even taking it a step further, being able to integrate with other third-party reporting is helpful too, because for most of our advertisers, they are either, again, leveraging our homegrown reporting or even tracking performance in Google Analytics. And it's, again, all done without a QR code. It's done just through the tech itself. So hopefully that answers your question, Josh, and others if you had something similar.
I must say the use of QR codes is ubiquitous, but one of the strangest ones, just to interject a personal experience here. So I was driving along the West Side Highway here in New York City at 60 miles an hour. I saw a billboard with a QR code. The logic escapes me, so we'll just go on.
Yeah, that one's probably not as safe, right? You don't want to be doing that while you're driving on the highway.
Couldn't figure that one out. Well, Alexa, one of our attendees, and this is an excellent point because I think this comes up a lot. One of our attendees admits that she is not on connected TV yet. She asks, I'm a little nervous seeing all of this and wondering if we've lost ground from competition who have had years to familiarize themselves with the platform. What advice would you have to stand out? And I guess a subsidiary question would be, how do you begin? I guess that would be the first question. How do you begin?
Sure. No, that's a really good question. And I can imagine, right, as we talk about how much this industry has grown and the momentum, I can appreciate that it might feel, again, a bit daunting. But it's kind of like working out. It's better late than never. So, it's easy enough to get started and start testing. And the nice thing is you're able to start testing on CTV at pretty much any point, right? You're not having to go through and negotiate big upfront deals or anything like that. So the timing can be flexible for when you actually start testing TV once you get the assets, right? It's based on your schedule. So hopefully that gives you some assurances. But the probably the most important place to start is to almost work backwards and think about, what are you trying to accomplish, right? How are you measuring success? What is it you're trying to achieve? And then kind of peel it back from there, right? So, okay, if I'm trying to drive leads as an example, okay, well, who are the users that you really want to drive more leads from, right? Or what are the types of customer that are most valuable to you? How do you want to message them? Or who do you want to try to bring in the door? And then from there, that can kind of start mapping out your targeting strategy. And then thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to say to those users, right? What about my brand is going to be compelling to those users? How can I, start developing a messaging strategy to reach those audiences effectively? So again, kind of starting backwards, right? Where do you want to get to so that you can map out how you then want to build out a testing strategy? And I think, again, we're working with either a platform or even a consultant that can kind of help you think that way is going to be really great, because then you can kind of map out what you want to do to test. And then the key thing from there is just recognizing that it is something that you can test and iterate on. So it's not like you have to do it once with one strategy and then that's all or nothing, right? It is a channel that you can evolve and that you can test different things for. So I would say as you're starting it for the first time, just keep in mind it's kind of like anything, even if you use, let's say, social media advertising as a comparison, right? Very rarely are you saying, all right, well, I launched a social media campaign, I tested it, that's it, right? You're going to test different targeting tactics, different messages, whether that's sequentially, whether that's A/B testing. You're going to try to see what works over time and then continue to optimize from there. And so that's similar with CTV. Part of it is just getting that initial test going and testing and iterating from there.
Got it. One of the points that you stressed in your presentation was that multi-platform presence is really essential. One and done on Hulu or something doesn't quite reach the audience or the scale that you'd like. One of our attendees asks, however, will the ability to measure cross-channel be a criteria to consider when selecting a partner, such as Mountain, for example? But for example, answer that question, if you will. I'm sure that you're going to answer in the positive, and maybe you can throw in another shameless plug about Mountain as well. How important is measuring cross-channel results? Sure.
Well, it's a good question, and I'd almost flip that on its head a bit to think about, right? What is the alternative, right? Like, if you're a brand and you're kind of doing some cherry picking buys, maybe you're only buying from one platform, and maybe they don't have the, let's say, more advanced attribution to measure results. Well, what are you missing then, right? A lot, I would argue. Having visibility and being able to use data to make informed business decisions, I think we can all agree is pretty important. So for for a lot of brands and advertisers, I would say that's a pretty big criteria, right? But I'm not going to lie and say that every advertiser is going to have the exact same strategy or goals on TV, because I don't think that's the case. I think, is there a place for branding? Sure, of course. But I think especially right now in today's market, a lot of advertisers have to be a lot more, let's say, critical about where they're investing and how they're measuring the success of that. And they're holding it to a higher standard. So that's where I do think having more robust measurement is key. And it's definitely something I would recommend to any advertiser, whether it was on Mountain's platform or not, right? Whether it's any CTV buy they're doing, is to think about, what do they really need to achieve for their business? And do they have a solution that can help them evaluate that objectively? And if not, it's probably worth rethinking that, right? So hopefully that answers that question. I don't want to speak for all advertisers or brands, certainly, but if I was running a business, I would definitely want to know what my advertising was doing and holding that to a higher standard.
Got it. One of our attendees asks specifically about celebrity endorsements. I mean, people of a certain age remember Joe DiMaggio and Mr. Coffee. One of my favorites now is Shaq with his icy hot muscle relaxant. Love to see Shaq on the TV. Our attendee asks, how will this move to CTV affect brands utilizing celebrity talent for commercials? Do you think it will be used even more in the future, less? And if so, why?
It's a great question. Man, I wonder what it's like working for a company that has celebrity talent. We know nothing about that at Mountain. But it's a great question. I think, to be honest, I don't know that I have an answer for that, because at the end of the day, I think as people, we're always going to be drawn towards certain personalities, and if those personalities, whether it's an actor, an athlete, whatever, if they're also feeling that call to a brand, or a brand sees affinity for that or with them, I think there's a great opportunity for storytelling. It's engaging, it's memorable. So I don't think that's going away. I think it's just always, a question of, depending on the brand, how much budget do they have to play with, right? Because you can develop really engaging stories even without, celebrity endorsement. But it's always going to be fun to have that in the mix if you have, again, like something that kind of ties the essence of the brand and that personality together, right? So even, again, with Mountain, with Brian Reynolds, there's a certain, I think, match stylistically between our brand and him, and it's fun and playful and about simplicity, and so it's I think if you're going to have any sort of endorsement, it's kind of just around aligning between like values and again, do I think that it'll increase in time in CTV? Possibly. There's certainly way more ways to connect and develop good content. We even see that, with our acquisition of QuickFrame and all of the different talent and creators that they work with. So the means of getting that type of endorsement are definitely more available, more widely available maybe than in the past. But it remains to be seen how that unfolds.
Let's take a detour just a minute. Could you explain a little bit about the QuickFrame acquisition and what it means for creators? It seems like it makes addresses one of our earlier questions about how to get started and developing content. What is this acquisition, and what have you done there with it?
Sure. So Mountain acquired QuickFrame, I guess officially earlier this year. And so it's now Quick Frame by Mountain. We're one entity. And I guess at the core, the goal and the vision of that really ties back to what we're trying to accomplish as a brand, which is kind of democratizing CTV. It's making it available, making it as effortless as possible, and providing solutions that enable brands to launch, and measure CTV, see the results from it, and be able to, again, test and learn in real time. That was the goal. And Quick Frame had a very similar vision on the creative side, which is being able to develop premium content, premium video at scale across everything from CTV, social, e-com and beyond, is being able to develop really high quality video because, as you mentioned, like as I was saying earlier in the conversation, it's that much more important to have relevant, timely content. We need to be able to engage and tell a brand story effectively and keep that fresh, or creative fatigue is very real. It's especially with CTV, right? A message can become redundant or overdone pretty quickly. And so with the acquisition and the partnership with Quick Frame coming in, it's allowed us to help a lot of our partners and others with developing that high quality video and making the production certainly a lot more cost effective, but also a lot more seamless, and support much faster turnaround as well. One of the things that has been, I think, most exciting for me personally and for the team is the launch of Creative as a subscription, which also allows us to basically develop this video for customers purely based on a commitment of media spend. So there's no actual hard cost to a brand for the creative itself. It's based on a partnership with Mountain as a whole, and a commitment in that. And so that's been really exciting to bring forward as well. That was kind of birthed from the two companies merging. So can't say enough great things about them. And I think it only opens up more opportunity for brands to be nimble and optimize their campaigns.
Alexa, you'd mentioned the incrementality report. Can you expand a little bit about what we'll see in that? One of our attendees, Omar, asks specifically about this report.
Awesome. Well, hi, Omar. Yeah, it's been a long time in the making to ensure that it was something that would really add a lot of value for our customers. And again, it just launched. So in the interest of time today, I won't go into too much depth other than it's a really, again, kind of tying back to what we try to do in general. We try to make it seamless. And so it's an in-platform report to see the incremental lift from prospecting campaigns on CTV. And for more info, definitely feel free to check out our website. There will be more content and support there. And we have a whole team on the platform side that'll be able to walk through specifics and methodology as well. But it is really exciting. It's again, just launched. So we are excited to see how our partners are able to now leverage this to inform decisions around their campaigns.
Alexa, one of our attendees, in this case, Ryan, asks about the possible danger of being too targeted, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. But with regards to audience segments, can being too targeted, geo, demo, you name it, have a negative effect on a campaign's ability to be nimble and easily optimizable?
That's a really good point. And you're right. So I'll go back a little bit on what I talk about, like being laser focused, because focus is good, but if you're getting down so nitty gritty that you only have, say, 5 households that meet that criteria, then you're right. Yes, that can absolutely be a downside or a risk. So it's a balance. And again, I think that comes down to sometimes just like taking a step back and thinking, okay, again, who am I trying to go after with what type of message? Sometimes it can be a little bit of an overload if you're refining and refining and refining and you create too niche of a subset to target. Or as an example, for certain brands and certain businesses, different targeting may not make sense. Like we'll use this example sometimes. If you're a pizza company, you may not be targeting people that are in market for pizza. Why? Because you're probably, not going to be directly in market for pizza unless you are currently actively trying to place an order. And then once you place your order, you're done, right? So for that, you might more look at a wider target, right? Everybody loves pizza. Great. You're not going to be wasting ad spend just by going after people, a little broader in that case. But if you're a B2B company and your solution is only usable or viable for certain types of industries, well, then certainly strategically, you're going to want to be a little bit more laser focused there. So that's where it's not necessarily one size fits all, but that's where it's helpful to be able to actually measure your kind of addressable audience size too, to see, okay, do I at least have a good portion of households that are part of this audience profile that I can run a campaign around? And, again, you can be nimble. If you find that it's too small, you can always add, or vice versa. So that's where kind of testing and tweaking over time is probably going to be valuable.
Great. Well, we have now reached the end of our time. Thanks to everyone for attending Ad Age's custom webcast, sponsored by Mountain. Now, we had a lot of great questions. We couldn't get to all of them today. I know that the Mountain team will reach out to those that we weren't able to address today on air to answer them as best they can. Now, as a reminder, you can also view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today, and you'll receive an email as soon as the archive is ready. So keep your eyes peeled on your inbox. You'll want to download it. You'll want to share it with your colleagues as well who weren't able to attend today. So on behalf of myself and Alexa Tierney at Mountain, we thank you so much for your time. Have a great and prosperous day.
Yes. Thank you, Christopher. Bye, everyone.